Hello, squad. Welcome to another session. Today we're going to talk about the Bologna Regional that just happened this weekend. We're going to take a look at the deck list, some stats, and make some predictions for Vegas. And let's just jump right into it. So this is the stats for day one. Again, pretty surprising for a lot of people is how diverse the meta is. We can see Draven 15, Kaisa 11, Irelia at 9. Right. And then even just, it seems like every deck is just represented. So again, very diverse meta. And I think the biggest reason for it is that the metal card economy in EN represents a bigger reward compared to China. In China, a lot of time it is hard to move some of the metal card just because the purchasing power available within the market for the Chinese average person. They are not going to be able to pay the fair price for the metal card. But in EN, again, right, metal card represents a bigger reward. So we see a very diversified, representation, and even at Ari, right, at 4%, 54 decks. So clearly going for the metal card here, and that kind of shapes up the meta. And I, see that going into Vegas will have something similar. Looking at the day two meta, so because how diverse the meta is, we see some higher conversion compared to play rate compared to day one. So we see again Draven at 38% dominating the field, absolutely right, and then Irelia at 26, Kaisa at 19, Israel at 18, Annie at 16. So we can from the data, we can see that any deck that's actually pretty decent and pretty good is able to, have a rather solid conversion rate, and even Ari at 15%, right? So again, very, very tough going for those metal cards, right? So again, if metal cards is kind of your game plan, you be prepared to have a very challenging time compared to Chinese meta. Okay, so here's the top A list. So again, 2 Israel, 3 Draven, 1 Irelia, 1 Victor, 1 MF. For anyone that is following the pre-event that Israel was able to take, I don't think it's surprising for Israel at the top. Again, very skillful, very hard to pilot deck, but again has a lot of potential, right? So that's the top A, and then again, with the event happening, Israel obviously made it, was able to 2-1 the Irelia and go to the final, and of course, all three Draven did drop at top A, which is a little bit surprising, but if you really think about it, it's not that surprising once you reach the top A table. So let's take a look at the deck list, and I'll go into a little bit more after why it's not as surprising to kind of fall at top 8. But again, let's take a look at first place, right? Lens Q won, LOR champion. So congratulations again to this person. Once again, proving himself to be one of the best art players in general. But if we take a look at Israel, it's the champion itself. Day two count 14, right? Conversion 18%, right there, right up there with a lot of the top decks. But much lower representation overall, which means less targeted. I think a lot of people knew Israel was good, but again, I think a mass majority of the people didn't prep too much for. I think Draven is still a lot of people prep. Again, deck has a high outplay potential, plus a lot of decision density that you need careful of. But again, right, deck is strong. It's been proven. It did well in China for the last few events. It win here. So this deck definitely something to be watch out for. Next we have MF, right, and then I think again for MF that oh, something that people didn't expect, but If we look at the numbers, it's almost invisible in the meta. I don't think anybody was expecting Aurora going into set 2. Opponents are prepared for Draven, Kai'Sa, Irelia if they're not prepared for MF. And when MF is, high rolling, it is very, very oppressive. But to make the deck consistent, right, they did cut Dead Bloom and just really try to focus on the Mind Splitter and the Volley Bear. And even then at that point, we're still seeing 3 Mind Splitters, and we're looking to recur some of our monsters through loss, right? So again, very cool deck, right? And yeah, very excited to see this deck going forward. See if we can see more tops, and yeah, just to prove if this deck is just not a lucky one-time thing, but it's a legit real deck, and that'll be very cool. Okay, so we have Irelia at third place, day 2 count 33, conversion rate 25.6%. Again, strong presence and strong ceiling. This is probably the healthiest profile and stats out of all the top decks currently. It has enough representation to be real. He's still flexible enough to adapt in top cut with a lot of the card choices like Zhonya's, like boots, triple boots of swiftness, right? Like Flash. Again, for some of you that have played Irelia personally, knows that boots of swiftness is especially good into some of those rogue matchups where they do play, for example, Victor, for example, Kai'Sa, where they would spend a lot of mana to deal with your Irelia. And if you don't draw your Draven, you're really reliant on your smaller units to uh, take some of the points really quickly before they can reestablish. Which, it's something that I definitely see that this card being very, very good. And it's very, very good into a lot of the other options. A good list to consider considering the spread of the matchups and the diversity of the meta. Okay, so next we have Victor, right? I think this is outside of a lot of people's expectation. Again, day 2 can 6 conversion, 11% on the lower end, right? Again, not the 39 spell, 35 spell, Jace Vanguard list that people are familiar with, right? A very grounded, very mid range, very traditional Victor list, which is very cool to see that being able to top, right? Again, deck is rare. It's going to be technical, matchup dependent, but if you're able to dodge some of the tougher matchups, right? You have cards, and you do have cards into Draven, such as Thousand Tail Bellows Press. Any miracle matchup, this combo also works. Singularity, amazing, right? Imperial Decree into Bellows Press. Call of the Weak Hidden Blade are all really good removals that deals with any types of mid-sized to large-sized bodies, right? So again, this deck is very low exposure. People are not going to be prepped for it. We're going to have a good time, and especially being Victor itself playing mid range. People is not even going to. They're not going to expect the mid range, right? I don't know how good this deck will be going to Vegas, but again, very interesting list to see. Our list. Again, here's the Draven list. Again, even Draven itself, the 3 top A lists are very diverse, right? The first is a very standard miracle with 2 axes, and then we had Randy's list where he played 1 Raza because he's a very adamant on the fact that he really likes all his cards, so he doesn't want to discard, and the trade-off is to only play 2 seals. But yeah, pretty cool list regardless. And then we have a very grounded, very solid mid-range rate. But unfortunately for the Dravens, that they did stop at top A, and most likely because everybody is very much prepped for the Draven matchup. So again, so what does this tell us from the data? Draven high conversion, low ceiling. Day 1 to day 2 conversion, 38% best in field. Uh, it, you know, 83 day 2 decks, massive representation. 3 copies in top 8, but 0 copies in top 4. This is a textbook sign of high floor, low ceiling deck. Draven was extremely consistent, right? And mid range Draven, easy to pilot at baseline, strong into the average field, but very predictable, likely to be targeted in top cut and loses a edge when opponent attacks and plays tightly against Draven. Everybody expects this matchup, right? Um, was it this bad luck for Draven? Statistically, no. Uh, and honestly, the expected outcome, it's kind of expected, and this type of pattern, like Draven mid range deck, is a pattern that shows up in a lot of plays, right? The MTG Pro, Flash of Blood Nationals, Pokemon Worlds, where archetype is high play rate aggro, or high play, just a mid range deck. Um, where where you see Draven like many top A's, but very weak of top 4. We see some mid play rate deck like Irelia being top 4 capable, and then a lot of the time the low play rate skill deck like Israel, Victor, maybe not Victor, but Israel MF would win the tournament in other card games. So you know from a statistic perspective, he does check out. And then here's the prediction part and recommendation part, and again, this will be my personal opinion, so you can click off the video now if that's it. But Kaisa is my recommended deck, right, going into Vegas. Again, uh it's a great topic. Kaisa has been extremely consistent. She won Dalian Open and was 50% of SCG Con Las Vegas top decks. Her game plan naturally counters Draven's reliance on finding big combat tricks. She just removes him, right? Doesn't give combat, will have draw, so very hard for Draven to deal with. I think and again, it's just a very natural pick that you can do against Draven. I think a lot of players would also have the Kaisas available. Again, this is the top 32 list where they ran 3 Kaisas. And when progress day, I think again, this list might have room for adjustment going to Vegas. But again, right, 3 Singularity, good into normal Draven, 3 Falling Star, raised into Miracle. Forerunner is a huge body, right? And then we just have so much removals, time warp to close out the game. Again, Kaisa is Kaisa. I don't think we need to speak any more regarding it. Yeah, there is a secret tech for Kaisa I would like to share. Because again, there's a lot of removals such as Victor's and such as Israel. I think that Sundisk again would be a very good card for Kaisa to play at 1 of. If we look at statistic in Chinese regionals, any deck that had an inclusion of Sundisk, 1 copy of Sundisk, did massively improve their win rate and top rate. So again, I think this is something that's not respected enough. You'll be able to help you accelerate some of these minor minions that Kaisa lacks, and maybe gives us opportunity to switch off Legion Rearguard and play Poro, which again would be hard for a lot of decks to deal with, and continue with our kind of a set 1 game plan where we play Poro and walk up with Poro to time warp, and it's going to be very hard for opponent to deal with. The next deck I would like to recommend, and of course it would be Irelia, right? This deck had an overall solid performance in Bologna, and managed to push to the top 4 and only fall against a Lansky's Israel with a 1-2 score. So again, that kind of speaks volumes to, how good the deck is. It's a great conversion rate. People's not as prepared for it as Draven, which will give the deck a big advantage. The secret tech, of course, is a second copy of Irelia, especially into a lot of, rogue matchups where their only way to really deal with you is to commit to a very big, tempo swing play where they spend a lot of mana to deal with their Irelia. But if you play a second copy or even Morbid's Return, right? You're gonna ask them, what will you do to the second one? And they'll probably not have an answer to that. But the actual secret tech, I think this too is pretty relevant, is Last Stand. I think Irelia has struggles into some of the larger boards. That does happen with Miracle and whatnot. And I think Last Stand especially being action, is something that will help Irelia push over the edge. And it's something that we'll be able to play once we include, uh, something like a second copy of Irelia or a Morbid Return, where we're not feeling too bad losing that card, right? And again, Last Stand will be able to give us incredible amount of powers to deal with pretty much any board. Um, but yeah, I think these are the secret tech I would like to, hopefully maybe see in Vegas. That'll be really cool. But I think these cards are really cool. Again, just wrapping up the video, key takeaways, right? Draven still sees the highest play rate and conversion, and I think you would be, uh, not out of this world to say that Draven will continue to be the highest play rate in Vegas. That's my expectation. Metal card being more relevant in EN is something that, you know, will be the driving force for more diversity, which is something that you'll have more diversity, which means there's be more decks, and there's something that you won't be able to prepare against all the decks. But I think it's good that have some respect for some of the decks, and maybe instead of teching, you have a overall improve your own game plan might be the potential way. But yeah, and then third point, be mindful of time issues, right? Something I think a lot of players did talk about. Time baiting is kind of a big problem. We see relevant figures talking about it, and a lot of time, uh, from it's not the problem of players. They have to calculate the might, especially into Miracle Draven. In other card games, where these kinds of strong decks that takes a long time exists, it's up to the player that plays the deck to play fast at a relative speed. And you know, I think a regular player, a regular opponent shouldn't get punished playing at regular speed. But again, do be mindful of time, and if you see your opponent slow playing or whatever, do not hesitate to give verbal warnings or even call it. But yeah, last thing I do want to mention is, when you're looking at some of these deck lists, do want to be mindful. A question needs to be in your head is, how many Draven did the person dodge in day one? Take a look at Randy's top. I think in day one he only played against one Draven. How many Draven did you dodge? Right? Against there's so many rogues, a lot of decks could have converted just out of pure luck, as well. So again, I think it's you need to look at the data as a whole and not isolate for Begonia as event. So, but yeah, that's it for the video. Thank you for tuning in and have yourself a good day.